Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Friday morning in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, I just landed here at Chicago Airport. I got in kind of late, so it's about 1 o'clock or so in the morning, and I'm recording this here in the near gate M7. So it's me, the guy vacuuming over in the corner. There's another guy over there sleeping, so I apologize if you hear some background noise in the video today. But I had a lot of time on the flight to think about some of the big questions I got asked this week as I was kind of traveling around parts of Canada and throughout the West. I want to address some of those questions today. First of all, I do want to just give a quick recap of November. So if we kind of zoom in here on the left, this is the month-to-date precipitation statistics. And we are looking at these just really to see who missed out on some of the recent precipitation as we now begun kind of our meteorological winter. And I just noticed some places here stretching from Arizona to New Mexico up into the hard winter wheat belt. That's been an area we've been discussing quite a bit. And also over here in the eastern corn belt. Those are kind of two broad areas that have been drier. But what the atmosphere really advertised its ability to do this month is to store up just a tremendous amount of cold air due to a lot of high latitude blocking. That's big high pressure cells over the Arctic. That's big ridges that build into Alaska. We're watching another one right now going to Greenland. And what it's doing is it's showing us that we can just store a lot of colder air in the western United States, also throughout the Canadian prairie, and at times this has really just come across the U.S. We're going to see that kind of on repeat again. But I wanted to stretch this out a bit farther because some of the big questions I was getting asked was, what do I anticipate drought to look like once we finish winter? So we need to address that today because the year-to-date precipitation ranks by climate district, which is what you're looking at here, show us just how desperate we are in the West to return a lot of moisture, how dry things are in the plains, including parts of the western corn belt. And we have seen drought kind of expanding with time here in parts of the Southeast in pockets. So big questions that loom for these upcoming months of winter is how much of the drought situation can be undone should the atmosphere remain open and unblocked and flowing. And that's what we really want to be assessing here. But I just want to make a point. There, California right now having in total kind of its second driest winter in the last 130 years. And you can see how dry the plains were. A lot of this was a lot of summer drought, but of course we had the fall drought on this as well. That's part of that drought that drove the Mississippi water levels so low. Now in the last 30 days, we just continued to see that harder winter wheat belt really showing up very, very dry. And this was probably the most common question I received is when will moisture start to return to this area? The short answer to that question is in the near term, I'm not seeing much. We may be waiting for a complete pattern shift where we need to develop some sort of subtropical component of the jet stream to actually start to draw moisture back into this area, which means we're going to continue going into winter with drought concerns in this area. The newest drought monitor released here on yesterday, December the 1st, once again just shows us the extent of that drought throughout the plains. And overall, the total amount of drought across the United States was reduced by a couple of percent. It's now down just a hair below 80% of land area in some form of drought, but still it's quite extensive across the country. Our latest soil moisture map continues that narrative, and you see that the majority of the Corn Belt getting over into the, from the plains all the way over here to Ohio and Michigan, continues to show very low soil moisture at 40 centimeters or 16 inches. Now remember, this is model data from NASA, but it still represents what I think to be some of the key areas where we've seen a lot of fall drought that's not going to carry into the beginning of winter. So with that as a backdrop, remember the last 72 hours, in fact, let's get an update of this map. We should have the 1 a.m. data in here. There we go. The last 72 hours, we saw one system exit, dumping a bunch of snow in through this region. We saw all the severe weather down south. I believe we're now well over 50 reports of tornadoes. There have been, of course, fatalities with this as well. And we've now seen the next system diving into the west, which has been impressive in its delivery of snow and some heavy rains here in Northern California. Just seeing that snow over the last 3 days, I was here in Coeur d'Alene. They had a foot of snow from this. The Cascades picking up a bunch, flew over them this afternoon, and you could just see it. I mean, they're just packed full of snow. And we're just now watching the beginning of the really heavy snow pile into the Sierra Nevadas and the heavy rain still coming into California. This system will bring some light snow to parts of the northern plains. I'll show you that in just a few seconds, also the upper Midwest, but still not quite the same magnitude as we anticipated about 7 or 8 days ago. So again, I want to keep showing you this map. It's the accumulated departure from normal and Snowpack, here through December 1st. Of course, we've had our major lake effect events, but the western U.S. snowpack right now is doing well for December. For November. Just an important point here. This map is most important to look at when we're in March. that's what the most important time period is to view this for the western United States. But I like seeing a good start to the winter snowpack here in the Pacific Northwest, all the way down to California, the Central Rockies. Well, in the near term, the system that is coming through California is going to move across the country and do so very quickly. It's going to be able to get where it is now, crossing here into the Four Corners states, all the way to Maine in a hurry. And the winds that are out ahead of this are very strong. We have high wind warnings, red flag warnings, high wind advisories, plus a winter storm winter weather advisory here for the northern plains around the Red River Valley. We still have the snow on the back side of this, so this system is really going to be quite a potent one in terms of its overall wind power, if you will. So take a look. This is how things are going to shape up. We kind of zoom in here about 12 hours from now, so the middle of the day on Friday. And we're going to be watching a very sharp cold front racing through the plains. Some westerly winds coming off the mountains are going to be very dry, but coming around this big high pressure cell just off the coast, we're really just feeding in some extremely warm air out ahead of this. Now, to show you what those temperatures are going to do, I'm just going to pull up the 0Z NAM, and we're going to start this at 10 a.m. on Friday. So you're going to watch through the middle of the day on Friday some very warm conditions building into Kansas. We might see temperatures topping 70 here. But look at the cold front just waiting here on the north to overtake this. And as we get into Friday night and then the overnight hours early into early Saturday morning, that front has advanced, meaning that the temperatures in Kansas will be in the 70s on Friday midday, Friday afternoon. And then by the time we get into Saturday morning, we'll have already seen them dropping down here, possibly into the teens in places, maybe here in Kansas and in Nebraska. So there's a pretty sharp front that is going to be diving here across the country. Now, while those strong winds are coming off the mountains, we're going to see humidity levels here that are going to drop down into that 10 to 30% range on very strong, like I said, very strong winds coming off the mountains. And that's why we continue to see the risk of wildfires in this area. So we've got, critical risk across parts of Colorado getting into Kansas, but this clips the panhandles as well. Total winds out of all of this, let's just go to the 0Z NAM to kind of get an idea. This system, as I said, is going to move very quickly across the United States, go over the Great Lakes, and head up to parts of New England. So if we just play through Saturday evening what the maximum accumulated wind gusts are going to look like, there's going to be a lot of places here experiencing some very strong winds across the country with this particular system. Now, what does it actually look like? Well, let's just pick up here with the model. I'm going to start this, how about here, around 6 o'clock this morning on Friday. So as we get ready, we're going to watch strong winds out ahead of this, out of the south, westerlies behind it, and snow's going to spread in the Rockies, getting up here into parts of Wyoming, and it'll eventually spread some light snow over parts of North and South Dakota. Now, while that's going on, there will be some showers and storms that kind of show up down here out of Texas, getting into parts of Arkansas and the lower and mid-Mississippi River Valley, but the heavier snows are going to move into parts of Minnesota and Wisconsin. And we might... it all depends on visibility overall, but we're approaching actually blizzard criteria here with the winds, the snow coming. Remember, there's no snow threshold in a blizzard warning. It just has to reduce the visibility to a quarter mile or less for 3 hours. So I'm gonna have to watch out for that. But that's going to move quickly over the top of the Great Lakes. You're going to see the main front cut through parts of the Tennessee Valley, delivering some snow. While that's occurring, we still have another push of moisture coming into the Central Valley of California, and one system will exit. High pressure builds in behind it, and what we have next is the next system kind of still pushing across the west. And this is a unique feature that's happening right here into parts of Arizona, and I'm going to show you that. So there's going to be a lingering front right here, but it's actually the upper level winds that are driving this, because by the time we get into this weekend, there's going to be a big ridge parked over Mexico, and around that, the flow's just going to come in this direction. So that's what's going to help aid in that precipitation. But this map really illustrates some of the bigger picture things I want to talk with you about. We cannot seem to get the Pacific jet to extend beyond about this point. It's breaking into a ridge right now in Alaska, and just very weak and highly amplified flow in the Gulf of Alaska. So systems are still kind of coming in from this trajectory. We are now starting to see the beginning of that large ridge we've been talking about building into Greenland as well. And as this pattern continues to evolve, I want to look at it from two different perspectives. Both of them are going to be from a North Pole view, but we're going to look at troughs and ridges first, and then we're going to look at the actual jet stream level winds. So this was what you just saw in that previous animation. And as we go forward into the weekend, we actually end up getting a bit of a high over low setup here, which is going to slow the pattern down temporarily. But while that's occurring, Notice the large ridge building into Greenland. And what's interesting is that big ridge building into Greenland reinforces this trough here, which kind of pulls this one into the Pacific Northwest and just yanks it more quickly across the country, rather than letting this high over low block, or really maybe it's more of an omega block, stay. So we technically can't call it a block because it moves, right? It's already out of there by next Tuesday into Wednesday. Now, the dominant feature going into next week is going to be the large ridge over Greenland and what it does on the backside with this really cold air that's coming in here. So as we play through and just take us out a week, this is to next Friday, going into next weekend, and finally out there at about day 10, what we see in the pattern is deeper troughs over this part of Siberia. We have a piece of the polar vortex here. Some sense of ridging over the Aleutian Islands, but a trough that's off the west coast. But I want you to see this. The flow coming across the United States is coming out of the northwest. And just a reminder, this kind of flow produces, generally speaking, convergence in the jet stream. That just gives you drier conditions. So the models are going to look at week 2 and see drier conditions. But I think we're mostly seeing that in the ensemble blend. There might actually be more frequent subtle features pulling moisture across the country. But this is impressive. This broad trough with a large blocking ridge here. If we were going to see this later in the year, and I'm talking about later in the winter, January, February, March, this would usually set up just an extremely active East Coast of the United States. But as it stands, you get out there, and this is what the jet stream level winds are doing. You see they're screaming around through Russia, coming off of Japan, but not extending across the Pacific. So that same thing we talked about on Monday is here. So the flow kind of splits, and it doesn't really regain its speed until it comes out offshore. So that's why when we look out here at this precipitation pattern, we don't see it being overly aggressively wet for large parts of the United States. It'll primarily just be here in the mid-south of the Tennessee Valley that's going to see the best chances of staying very wet. Remember, we have a polar vortex split happening at the same time and a large ridge building into Greenland, so very weak flow going on there. We're going to look at the differences in temperatures between North America and Europe at the end of this video. But I see this pattern, and I'm going to tell you, if I'm looking at the tropics for a teleconnection, because I think it's both a tropical feature that's driving this in the MJO, and I also think that it has a lot to do with the high pressure we continue to build over the Arctic. But it looks to me a lot like an MJO Phase 7 in December. So see, there's your strong winds coming off of Japan, but they don't extend. You get big ridging events that happen here or here, and therefore the troughs move over the eastern half of North America. But remember, we still have some kind of a southeast ridge going on, and we're seeing that in the pattern right now. So I'm really kind of seeing an MJO Phase 7 out of the setup of this. So does that make sense with the trade winds, which are still quite strong? I think it does. You know, if I kind of just line up here where the strong easterly winds are meeting the westerlies coming off the Indian Ocean, that's a lot of, kind of sits over Phase 7. So we put all that together and we say, what else is happening? This is that polar vortex split I was talking about. So one lobe is sitting over here. The other one is sitting right here. We have warmer air pushing in this direction and in that direction, which is causing the split. So this is already happening by next Tuesday, and those winds look something like this. So when you see this pattern setting up, this just tells us that already in December we have seen the tendency for a lot of Arctic high pressure, big ridges that have been pinching into the polar vortex and causing it to split. And therefore, this is going to give us a very volatile temperature pattern throughout winter if it continues, and also really increases the risk of significant cold air outbreaks. Okay, with all of that as a setup, we do at least need to see how the models are responding. So we're going to do our typical GFS versus ECMWF. As I play this forward, we've already seen this first system there. So that's through Saturday. Now the next system that comes in, remember, there's a large ridge sitting and spinning here, and there's the tail end of a front. And while that's going on, remember that high of a low block? The next low comes in just like this. It's pretty well resolved in both models. So what will happen is that low will sit off the west coast, delivering more moisture to California, which is great, and some snows into the interior of the Pacific Northwest. But this is here on Monday morning, getting into Monday afternoon and evening, and then playing out there through early next week. What you're going to notice is a large area of high pressure here with some stalled out frontal boundaries there, which are going to be fed by that subtropical subtropical ridge, and that's where I think we're going to see the heaviest rainfall. All right. Now, this is next Tuesday. We just keep going out there to next Wednesday and Thursday. See the high pressure and control? We just seem to keep leaving these fronts in this particular position, which is where the rain's going to continue to come in. So let's plot out to the next Thursday and Friday. The models are in a bit of disagreement. The GFS more aggressive on a system here. European not so much with it. But we just played this out there through next Friday and Saturday. We see this one area continuing to get hit with precipitation. So let's add it all up using the European model. Playing through the weekend here, going into next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We'll just leave it right here, Thursday. In fact, let's take it out a full week. Why don't we? There we go. And we can see the heaviest rainfall is going to be right over, really parked over Tennessee, northern Mississippi, and Alabama, stretching back to Arkansas. We're very dry in the interior where there's been problems with it being dry. But again, multiple pushes of moisture coming into California, really working hard at eating away in the drought in this area early in the season. Another way to look at it is this is the probability of getting at least an inch of rain or an inch of total precipitation over the next 10 days. Here's the probability of getting 2 inches. Oops, sorry, it switched to the new model run. Let's go back and grab that 12Z run again. I'm sorry, or the 12Z run. There we go. And pull that out to 10 days. There it is. So that's that 10-day outlook here for 2 inches, Sierra Nevada, right here over Tennessee. And if you want to find who's being dry, let's go to the same map, but I want to go to the people that are getting less than. This is the probability of less than a 1/10 of an inch of total precipitation, there. So that really just shows you how dry things are continuing in the plains, also over Florida and in Southern California to Arizona. Okay, week 2. Remember, this was the time period that I said the models might appear to be too dry. We've got too much flow coming out of the northwest in the model. I think it's more there because of the blend. I think we could actually get more systems coming across the United States, maybe a few more clippers coming in around that deeper trough than what's advertised here. So I wouldn't look at week 2 as being overly dry at this point. On the temperature side of it, we've already seen these temperatures on Friday, and they are hot. Going forward into Saturday, though, the front clears through and the warmth moves farther to the east. Now, Sunday, a quick rebound. It lasts into Monday, but the next shot at really cold air starts into Montana and into North and South Dakota, and this just continues to be a problem here across the west and northern part of the United States. The new long-range outlooks just continued as well. Remember what we talked about in the beginning. We just keep storing up cold air in the Canadian prairie, and through the beginning of December, we seem to let it out consistently across the prairie over toward the Great Lakes and anchor it also in the western United States. As we finish that first full week of December and pour into the second week, but the only place that hangs on to the warmer bias is pretty far to the south. But that's a lot of cold air moving into the eastern part of the United States as that very large ridge builds here, giving us that negative NAO signal over parts of Greenland. So there it is. That's your mid-December, pretty substantial cool-off coming here. Now, some new CPC data kind of suggests the same thing. I showed you this in the morning report, but the new 1-month outlook for December was officially released on the 30th, and we've got quite a bit of colder air in store here for the northern part of the United States. Had a couple of great comments on the YouTube feed, some folks from Montana just saying, hey, there are some benefits to the cold air, but when you're trying to feed livestock and you're going through your hay very quickly due to this cold weather, that's where things become quite problematic, and that's something important that we should continue to monitor for those folks. But I'd like to go from here and show you the new seasonal drought outlook, because while we expect improvement in the northwest, much of the plains is forecast to have drought persist. We see improvement in the eastern Corn Belt to the mid-south, but the newest runs suggest that more than likely due to some subtropical ridging here, we have drier conditions throughout parts of the southeast we're going to have to continue to monitor. From there, I would like to show you a couple of important things that the models continue to hone in on. Over the next 30 days, that's what you're looking at here, the European model keeps the Arctic oscillation negative. It also keeps the North Atlantic oscillation negative for most of that time. What I'm representing for you here is that high latitude blocking. And as a result, we see at the beginning of the pattern a lot of this, just a lot of big ridging here over the next, 2 to 3 weeks over Greenland. And the pattern wants to hang on to that all the way until the solstice and beyond. Now, when you see this This means that there's relatively weaker flow coming into the northwest. It then dives around this trough. And you put a trough over the eastern half of the country, it could mean more active systems up the east coast. But right in through here, this is a lot of convergent flow. And that's why when you see that particular pattern, the models, if we kind of just zoom in here on the United States, are going to be kind of over on the more aggressively dry outlook. And I don't think this is going to verify. And the reason for that is I think we're seeing more problems with model spread, and it's kind of the model latching onto what's going on over Greenland. And I think that it's not fully capturing the Pacific jet stream behavior. I think the jet is going to be a bit more energetic and moving a bit more, even though I know we've lost some momentum in the flow. Still think we're going to be wetter than what's advertised here. And I don't see this region being overly dry. So I think I'm kind of just going against it a bit, but I don't think this is what we're going to see. I do agree, though, with its temperature forecast. If we do see that pattern, it does not appear as though the front part of this winter is going to see sustained warmth. I think it's going to be the exact opposite. Lots of chances for some cold air to come out across the country. Okay. From here, let's go talk about La Niña briefly. This is an animation throughout the month of November looking at sea surface temperatures. And you do notice at the end of November, right here at the end of this animation, we start to lose some of those dominant, cold anomalies as the trade winds begin to just falter a little bit. What was interesting was that the new outlook put out by BOM about a week ago, that's the Bureau of Meteorology from Australia, where they summarize different modeling agencies here, that from December to January, they now show there being less aggressive collapse of La Niña. They're now suggesting that it's maybe going to be in February into March when it's going to fully let go. But as I keep saying, this is looking at ocean temperatures. I think that by the beginning of January, the trade winds are already going to let go, leaving the flow pattern up to the MJO and up to the mid-latitude dynamics, which is mainly the flow over the Pacific and over the North Atlantic that's going to take over. But I at least wanted to show you what they were thinking. CPC continues with a very La Niña look for winter temperatures. In other words, very cold across the northern tier of the U.S. If there's a place to be warmer, it's over the south. And one of the big reasons why I think we will see a reduction in drought this winter is because better flow into the northwest. And look here in parts of the Ohio and Mississippi Valley, the models continue to stress that this very La Niña look is quite a strong possibility. If there's risk of being drier, it's in the Central Plains and it's over the south. Now, I've been calling this map into question for a while because if La Niña lets go and we do get a subtropical jet, then this won't verify. We will see better moisture here. But I've got to get that to happen first before I can really say that this CPC outlook is too aggressively dry in this area. Okay. From here, I want to give you a quick update internationally. We're going to start in South America. One of the new maps from GRACE, this is a NASA satellite looking at root zone soil moisture, shows us some of the issues happening in Brazil, but very dry conditions into parts of Argentina continue to be a problem. Now, I showed this map earlier, and I want to just make a point about this one. This is just the last 15 days of precipitation. And right in through this part of Mato Grosso into Mato Grosso do Sul, Paraná, and Rio Grande do Sul, some places in here have only received between 20 and 40 millimeters of rainfall. And what's important about that number is that over the last 15 days, there's still been in places here between an inch and an inch and a half of rainfall overall. Yes, that is drier than what's normally here, but it's also important to see what is grown in these areas. So Mato Grosso do Sul, Paraná, and Rio Grande do Sul. I want to pull up the latest map, which was just released by the USDA. And while Mato Grosso do Sul contributes about 8% in total to soybeans, that dry area in Mato Grosso is not their major production area. And down into Paraná and Rio Grande do Sul, sure, it's been a bit drier, but there are different soils here compared to the northern growing areas. So we have seen decent moisture still in place in parts of Brazil, and we're going to continue to see that going forward. Because over the next 10 days, there's near normal rainfall here, better rains coming into Mato Grosso do Sul east. The driest conditions are still being forecast for Argentina. And Argentina has really suffered through a very dry spring. Looking at their NDVI values, if this will load for me quickly here, I picked off all of these locations Must have lost my internet connection. I apologize for that. But can you see right down here, it's kind of shaded? They're still in these areas looking at their lowest NDVI values in the last 20 years. And as we look forward into this particular region, we know that it's going to continue to stay drier. Here's my last thing for you today. This is the new European model outlook for December for Europe. And we do see that that big blocking ridge that's over Greenland is going to be forcing more repeated shots of colder air coming across Europe. And we had been talking about this being a risk this year with the setup we were already seeing this late fall, now early winter. So we have a lot to continue to watch over the weekend. I look forward to giving another long-range update on Monday. I really appreciate your patience with my travel schedule this week. That's important to me that I tell you that, because I really value the support you all give me here with my forecasts. So we'll talk again soon. Thanks.